It happened on my 66th birthday. The day my son Ethan Hale showed me how little a mother can mean. Once money clouds love. If you are watching this video, please like and subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you are listening to my story of revenge from. I want to know how far it has reached. The afternoon sun poured through the kitchen window as I finished frosting the vanilla cake. The scent of sugar and butter filled my small house in Seattle, a place I had kept tidy for decades. I wore my best blue dress, the one I bought 15 years ago for Ethan's graduation. When the doorbell rang, my heart fluttered with hope. I imagined a warm hug, maybe a bouquet of flowers. Instead, Ethan walked in, his phone still in hand, talking about investments. His wife Vanessa followed, her perfume thick in the air. Behind her was Patricia Rivers, her mother, draped in pearls and confidence. Ethan's voice was bright as he turned to Patricia. "Mom, I just sent the money. 150,000, right? It should be in your account now. Consider it my way of saying thank you for everything you've done for us." Patricia's smile was thin but victorious. "You're too generous, Ethan. You really didn't have to." Ethan laughed softly. "You've done more for me in 1 year than most people do in a lifetime." I stood there frozen, holding the knife I had used to cut the cake. My son had never once spoken about me that way. Then he turned toward me and handed over a small white envelope. "Here you go, Mom. Thought you could use a little something for yourself." Inside was a $20 Walmart gift card. I forced a smile. "Thank you, sweetheart. You really shouldn't have." Vanessa looked around the room, her eyes scanning the old furniture. "This place feels nostalgic," she said softly to Patricia. But I caught the undertone. Patricia nodded. "It reminds me of the past. Some people are just comfortable staying there." Ethan glanced at his watch. "We have to leave soon, Mom. Big dinner with investors tonight. Oh, and you should think about selling this house. Too big for one person. There's a new senior community opening near Lakewood. It would be perfect for someone your age." I nodded slowly, pretending not to hear the sting. They left in a rush of perfume and expensive laughter. The door closed, and silence filled the room. The cake sat untouched, candles half melted. I looked down at the card in my hand. $20. That was the price of my motherhood, 40 years of sacrifice reduced to a plastic card. In that stillness, I whispered to myself, "Never again." The mother who begged for love is gone. From this day forward, I will live for myself. And that promise, spoken into the quiet air of my empty house, was the moment my revenge was born. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house was too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you hear your own heartbeat and every regret that ever lived inside you. I sat by the window with a cup of cold coffee, watching the streetlights shimmer through the drizzle. The gift card lay on the table beside me, mocking me with its smallness. My mind drifted back to the days when I was young and full of hope, when Ethan was still a boy with skinned knees and wide eyes. I was 24 when his father left, leaving behind a note that said he wasn't ready to be a family man. I still remember standing on the porch, clutching that piece of paper while the baby cried in my arms. I swore that day I would never let my child suffer because of someone else's cowardice. Years later, that promise became my whole life. I worked for the state office in downtown Seattle, filing papers, answering phones, surviving on instant coffee and vending machine sandwiches. My co-workers spent their weekends on trips or new hobbies. I spent mine clipping coupons and balancing a notebook of expenses. Every dollar had a destination. Ethan's future. When he was 12, He came home from school one day with a flyer about a science camp. His eyes shone when he said, "Mom, only 10 students got picked. It costs $500. I remember the way my stomach twisted because I didn't have that kind of money. I told him, "Give me 2 days." And I worked overtime cleaning files until midnight for an entire week just to make it happen. I used to watch him sleep after those long nights, the streetlight touching his hair, and whisper, "You'll never know what I gave up for you." When Ethan was accepted into medical school, it felt like the universe was finally rewarding me. He hugged me and said, "Mom, I'll make you proud." And I believed him. I sold my old car, took a small loan, and sent every cent I could spare to pay his tuition. I never bought myself new clothes, not even when my coworkers teased me about wearing the same coat every winter. There were nights when I came home too tired to eat, my hands shaking from exhaustion. But one look at his framed photo on the shelf gave me strength. I told myself, one day he'll see, he'll understand. But the years passed, and success changed him. The boy who once held my hand while crossing the street began walking ahead of me, pretending not to know me when his new colleagues were around. Now, sitting alone in this small living room, I see the truth I refused to see for years. I gave him everything: money, time, health, love, and in return, I taught him that I would always give, no matter how little he gave back. The rain outside softened to a whisper. I pressed my palm against the cold glass and murmured, "Never again." Tomorrow, I start saving for myself. Tomorrow, I begin my new life. And for the first time in decades, I went to bed not as Ethan's mother, but as Diana Hale, a woman ready to take her life back. 2 weeks passed after that birthday, and every morning, I woke up feeling a little colder toward my son. I stopped waiting for his calls. I stopped checking my messages. Instead, I poured my coffee, sat by the window, and tried to remember what peace used to feel like. Then one Saturday afternoon, Ethan arrived unannounced. I was pruning the small roses by the porch when his car pulled up. That silver Tesla. He once said I was too old to understand. Vanessa stepped out first, her heels clicking on the pavement, followed by Patricia carrying a brochure that shimmered under the sundae. Ethan waved his phone as he walked toward me. "Mom, we've got great news. We're buying a new house in Pinecrest Ridge. 3 bedrooms, a private gym, a wine cellar. You'll love it." I wiped the dirt from my hands and said softly, "That sounds wonderful, Ethan." Vanessa smiled, but her tone carried a bite. "It's a neighborhood that really fits our lifestyle now. My mother's been amazing connecting us with the right people. Networking is everything these days." Patricia nodded proudly. "I just want what's best for my daughter and my son-in-law. In a community like this, reputation matters." Ethan turned to me again. "I just sent 100,000 as the down payment. Patricia's helping us handle the paperwork." I tried to keep my voice calm. "That's a big step. I hope you've thought it through carefully." He laughed, a short, sharp sound. "Don't worry, Mom. You wouldn't understand the kind of investments we're dealing with." Vanessa leaned closer to him. "Maybe your mom could sell her place too. She doesn't need 2 bedrooms all to herself." Ethan nodded. "That's true. You could buy something smaller, something easier to maintain. Use the rest of the money to fix yourself up a little. Maybe get that facelift everyone's doing now." The pruning shears slipped from my hand. I looked at him, my voice trembling. "A facelift?" He shrugged. "You're aging, Mom. It would be good for your confidence, and honestly, It would be easier when I introduce you to important people. Patricia chuckled softly. There's a clinic I can recommend, dear. It's not downtown, but it offers discounts for seniors. Something inside me cracked. I felt my knees weaken, but I forced myself to stand straight. I said quietly, I'm fine as I am. Ethan sighed, already checking his watch. We've got a dinner tonight with investors, so we should go. But think about what I said, Mom. This house is too much for you. As they walked back to the car, I stayed frozen by the roses, the sun burning the back of my neck. When the engine started and their laughter faded down the street, I whispered to the empty yard, that was the last time you'll ever talk to me that way. Ethan Hale. That night, something fierce and new began to grow inside me, a seed of quiet rebellion that would soon bloom into revenge. That night, I didn't cry. I just sat at the kitchen table with the lights off, listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator and the rain tapping on the window. My hands were steady now. The pain had turned into something sharper, colder, like a blade being forged. I opened my old filing cabinet, the one Ethan once called outdated. Inside were folders, each labeled carefully in my handwriting. Pay stubs, pension statements, bonds, savings certificates. I turned on my laptop, entered the password I hadn't used in years, and stared at the numbers glowing on the screen. $980,000. It was my life's work. Every penny earned from decades of skipped vacations and secondhand clothes. Ethan never knew about it. He thought I lived paycheck to paycheck. Maybe that was my mistake. I made myself small so he could feel big. I whispered to the glow of the screen. Not anymore. The next morning, I called a financial advisor I had once met at a retirement seminar. His name was Raymond Grant, a calm man with a voice that carried quiet authority. He invited me to his downtown office. When I arrived, he looked surprised. Mrs. Hale, it's been years. What brings you in? I told him everything. My son's success, his coldness, the humiliation. He listened without interrupting, then said, You've spent your life taking care of others. It's time to make your money work for you. He helped me rearrange my investments half into real estate funds, half into dividend stocks. When he handed me the new portfolio, I felt something awaken. Confidence. That evening, I sat by my window again, this time with a notebook open. I wrote down every goal: learn about finance, upgrade my wardrobe, rebuild my health, and most important, never let Ethan use me again. Over the next few weeks, I spent my evenings reading books about money management. Words like compound interest and equity stopped being foreign. I started waking up early to walk by the lake, clearing my mind, picturing the life I could still build. Ethan called once during that time. He sounded cheerful. Mom, have you thought about selling your house yet? I could help you handle the process. I replied calmly. I'll think about it, dear. But I had already decided. The next chapter of my life wouldn't involve selling, it would involve rising. When I hung up, I looked at my reflection in the darkened window. For the first time in years, I didn't see a tired mother. I saw a woman preparing for war, one who had finally realized that silence is the strongest weapon of all. 3 months after that humiliating birthday, my life looked completely different. The apartment that once felt like a cage now felt like a command center. Every morning, I brewed fresh coffee, opened my laptop, and checked my investments. The numbers grew slowly, but steadily, like small victories on a private battlefield. One Friday morning, a message popped up from Ethan. It read, "Need your signature on some loan papers. Urgent." I stared at it for a full minute before replying, "No." 10 minutes later, the phone rang. "Mom, what do you mean, no? You've always co-signed for me." I spoke evenly. "I'm still paying for the last loan you abandoned, Ethan. I'm not risking my future for your debts." His tone hardened. "What retirement, Mom? You barely have enough to survive." "You'd be surprised," I said quietly. "I've managed just fine." There was a pause, and then the disbelief in his voice sharpened into anger. "So, you do have money. You've been hiding it while I've been working myself to death." "Who paid for your medical school, Ethan?" I asked softly. "Who paid for your exchange program, your first office, your apartment? That was your duty," he snapped. "You're my mother." "No, Ethan, that was my choice." "A choice you've mistaken for obligation." He hung up on me. I didn't call back. That afternoon, I walked into a boutique I'd passed 1,000 times, but never entered. The clerk smiled politely at first, the way people do when they expect you to buy nothing. But when I chose a navy pantsuit and handed over my card, her posture changed. It was a small, delicious victory. A week later, I met with Raymond again. He smiled when he saw the confidence in my step. "You've changed, Mrs. Hale." I smiled back, just learning the difference between survival and living. He showed me a listing for a 3-story home in Maplewood Heights, a neighborhood far above anything I'd ever imagined. The price tag read $1.3 million. "Would you like to see it?" he asked. I thought of Ethan's words. "Mom." "Yes," I said. "Schedule a viewing." That evening, as the city lights shimmered outside my window, I ran my fingers along the spine of my financial notebook. My plan was no longer just about money. It was about dignity, I whispered to myself. "You wanted me small, Ethan. Now you'll see what small can become when it finally decides to stand tall." The morning I visited the house in Maplewood Heights, the sky was clear, the kind of blue that feels like a clean page waiting for a new story. The gate opened with a quiet hum, revealing a cobblestone driveway lined with trimmed hedges and white roses. I felt my pulse quicken. This was not just a property, it was a declaration. The realtor, a young woman named Claire, greeted me with professional warmth. "Mrs. Hale, the owners are relocating to Boston. They want a fast sale. The listing is for 1.3, but I believe they'd accept 1.2 for the right buyer." We stepped inside. Marble floors, soft golden light filtering through tall windows, and the faint scent of jasmine, the kind of place Ethan and Vanessa would have boasted about to their friends. The kind of place I had once been told I would never belong to. Claire smiled. "You seem comfortable here." "I am," I said quietly. "Maybe because it finally feels like something I earned." I walked through each room slowly. The spacious kitchen, the curved staircase, the balcony overlooking the lake. For years, I had watched other people live this kind of life. Now I realized I could afford it all along. I just never believed I deserved it. When Claire asked if I'd like to make an offer, I didn't hesitate. 1.2 million. Cash. She blinked in surprise. "Are you certain?" "Absolutely," I said, signing the papers with a steady hand. 2 days later, my offer was accepted, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't buying something for my son. I was buying something for me. Moving day arrived in late summer. The sun warmed the new front porch as I stood there holding the keys. The neighborhood was quiet, gated, safe, beautiful. I ran my hand along the brass nameplate that read, Hale Residence, a name I was reclaiming. When I called Raymond to thank him, he chuckled. So, what's next for you, Diana? I smiled. Next, I make this house a home and maybe buy a car that doesn't groan at every hill. That evening, I sat on the balcony, watching the lake shimmer in the twilight. The air smelled like new beginnings. I poured a glass of wine and whispered, Welcome home, Diana. Across the distance, faint city lights blinked, a reminder of the old world I had just left behind. And somewhere in that world, Ethan still believed I was the poor, quiet woman who would never rise above her place. He was about to learn that mothers, once underestimated, can rewrite their stories one key, one house, one quiet triumph at a time. It had been nearly 6 months since that humiliating birthday, and I was no longer the same woman who once stood trembling with a $10 gift card in her hand. My mornings began with the quiet rhythm of purpose, fresh coffee, the rustle of newspapers, and the scent of lilies from my own garden. I walked with a lighter step, dressed with intention, and spoke with the calm certainty of someone who had finally remembered her worth. Then one afternoon, the phone rang. The screen flashed his name, Ethan. I let it ring twice before answering. Mom. His tone was all business. We need to talk about your apartment. My apartment? Yes. I found an interested buyer. He's offering $200,000. It's a fair price given the condition. I smiled to myself. The apartment was worth more than double that. Ethan, I said gently, I'm not selling. Mom, be reasonable. You don't need that much space. It's becoming unsafe for someone your age to live alone. I've already found a retirement flat, small, cozy, with bingo nights and crochet classes. You'll love it. My grip on the phone tightened. Suitable for me, you mean? Exactly. People of your background, he said, his voice dripping with condescension. I took a deep breath. Ethan, I appreciate your concern, but I've already moved. A pause. What do you mean, you've moved? Moved? Where? To Maplewood Heights. Silence. Long, heavy silence. That's not funny, Mom. You can't afford. Number 38, I interrupted. The keys are in my hand right now. You bought a house there? That's impossible. You're welcome to visit and see for yourself. Bring Vanessa and Patricia if you'd like. Tomorrow, at 4. He didn't answer, just breathed heavily, trying to process the unthinkable. I ended the call calmly and walked to the mirror. The woman looking back at me wore confidence like a crown. The next day, I prepared everything carefully, the fine china, a table of pastries from the same French bakery that catered Ethan's wedding, and a pot of my favorite coffee. I wore a simple white dress, pearls at my neck, and a small smile that came easily now. At exactly 4 o'clock, a sleek car rolled through the gate. I watched from the balcony as Ethan stepped out, followed by Vanessa and Patricia. Their expressions shifted from confusion to disbelief as they stared at the 3-story home before them. I walked down the marble steps slowly, savoring every second. Good afternoon, I said calmly. Welcome to my home. Their silence was the sweetest music I had ever heard. Ethan stood at the edge of the driveway, staring at the house as if it had materialized out of thin air. His jaw tightened, and Vanessa's fingers clutched his sleeve. Patricia's painted smile trembled, unable to hide her shock. I could see the disbelief flickering in their eyes, the same eyes that once looked down on me. I motioned toward the open door. Come in. The housekeeper just brewed fresh coffee. Vanessa blinked. Housekeeper? Yes, her name is Marlene. She helps me keep the place in order. As they stepped inside, the soft glow of the chandeliers filled the marble foyer. The scent of roses and warm pastry drifted through the air. Ethan looked around, his voice barely a whisper. You actually live here? I smiled. Quite comfortably, yes. Patricia's eyes darted to the art on the walls, the designer furniture, the polished floors. She pressed her pearls nervously. This must have cost a fortune. 1.4 million, I said casually, pouring coffee into delicate china cups. Paid in full. Ethan turned sharply. That's impossible. You never had that kind of money. I stirred my coffee slowly. You're right. I didn't have it. Vanessa's tone sharpened. But you lived like you had nothing. Old car, old clothes. Why pretend to be poor? Because humility never needed an audience, I said, meeting her eyes. You should try it sometime. Patricia set her cup down too hard, cracking the saucer. Ethan, she whispered, maybe we should go. No, I said firmly. Stay. We haven't even finished the pastries. He glared at me. Why are you doing this, Mom? To humiliate us? I leaned back in my chair. No, Ethan. To remind you that worth isn't measured by the people you impress, it's measured by the dignity you keep. Vanessa crossed her arms. You've changed. No, dear. I've returned to who I was before I let others make me small. The silence that followed was almost tangible. Even Patricia had no words. After a moment, I stood and motioned toward the grand window overlooking the garden. You see that? That's my piece. Every petal, every brick, every inch of this house I built from self-respect, not approval. Ethan looked away, shame rising like a tide in his eyes. As they left, I walked them to the door. Patricia muttered a stiff goodbye. Vanessa avoided my gaze, but Ethan lingered for a second, his voice barely audible. I never knew you had this in you. I smiled. That's because you never looked close enough. The door closed softly behind them. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel small. I felt seen. 3 days passed before I heard from Ethan again. The silence was telling it wasn't the silence of peace, but of pride crumbling. When the call finally came, I was sitting on the balcony, the late afternoon sun soft against my face. The screen flashed his name again, and this time, I answered on the first ring. Mom. His voice was lower than usual, strained. We need to talk. Come over, I said calmly. I'll be in the study. He arrived alone this time. No Vanessa. No Patricia. Just Ethan, the boy I once carried on my shoulders to the park, now standing in front of me looking older, tired, and unsure of himself. He scanned the room, his eyes moving from the bookshelves to the large mahogany desk. You really did all this by yourself, didn't you? I nodded. 40 years of discipline will surprise you, Ethan. He sat down slowly, rubbing his temples. Why didn't you ever tell me? About the money, the investments, any of it? Would it have mattered? I asked quietly. You were too busy pretending I didn't exist. He flinched, guilt flashing across his face. That's not fair. Fair? I repeated softly. When I was in the hospital with pneumonia, you sent money for a cab instead of visiting. When I needed company, you sent silence. When I needed my son, you sent excuses. He looked down, voice cracking. I was trying to build a future, Mom, at the expense of your past, I replied. You built a career, but forgot the hands that raised you. He didn't speak. The silence stretched between us like a bridge too fragile to cross. Finally, he whispered, I'm sorry. I leaned forward. Are you sorry because you lost control of me or because you finally saw me? He hesitated, then said softly, because I saw you, and I didn't like what I saw in myself. For a long moment, I studied his face. The arrogance was gone, replaced by exhaustion and a shadow of shame. You know, Ethan, I said, when you were a boy, you once told me you'd buy me a big house one day. He gave a small, broken laugh. Looks like you beat me to it. I smiled faintly. I didn't build this house to beat you. I built it to remember myself. He nodded slowly, tears welling in his eyes. I don't deserve your forgiveness. Forgiveness isn't about deserving, I said. It's about freeing yourself from what others made you carry. He looked up, eyes glistening. Then, can we start again? Maybe as two people, not just mother and son? Maybe, I said. But this time, you'll visit because you want to, not because you need to borrow something. He stood, hesitated, and then hugged me awkward at first, like someone learning to speak again after years of silence. As he left, I stayed by the window, watching his car disappear down the hill. The sunset painted the sky gold, and for the first time in a long while, I felt something close to peace. The wound was still there, but it was finally healing from the inside out. Months passed after that evening in my study. The tension that once filled every corner of my life had slowly begun to fade. I saw Ethan more often, sometimes for dinner, sometimes just for coffee on the porch. He came without asking for anything, just to sit and talk. It was strange at first, hearing him ask about my garden, my books, my health, as if learning who I was for the very first time. Vanessa joined him once, quieter than before. Her tone careful, but sincere. She complimented the house, the flowers, even helped me set the table. I could see that life had humbled her too. Patricia, however, stayed away. Pride keeps some people prisoners forever. When Ethan and Vanessa announced they were expecting a child, he came to tell me himself. His voice trembled slightly. Mom, we're thinking of naming her Diana. I froze. The coffee cup halfway to my lips. After all these years, hearing my own name spoken with pride instead of pity felt like a gift I hadn't dared to imagine. I smiled. If she carries that name, make sure she also carries its lesson. He frowned. What lesson? That no one's worth is measured by how much money they have or how perfectly they fit into someone else's idea of success. It's measured by how they treat the people who built the ground they stand on. Ethan nodded slowly, his eyes soft. I understand now, Mom. You were never small. I just wasn't ready to see your strength. Later that night, after they left, I stood by the window, watching the city lights blink in the distance. The same city that once made me feel insignificant now looked small beneath the moonlight. My reflection stared back at me older. Yes, but whole. I thought of all the women like me, mothers who had poured every ounce of themselves into their children, only to be forgotten when comfort replaced struggle. Women who once believed love meant sacrifice and silence meant peace. To them, I would say this: don't wait for others to value you. Build your own worth. Learn, save, rise, and never apologize for it. Love deeply. but never lose yourself in the process. A week later, Ethan visited again, this time with a small velvet box. Inside was a bracelet, engraved with simple words, "For the woman who taught me what value really means." I fastened it around my wrist, feeling the cool silver against my skin. I didn't need the gift, but I accepted it because it carried something far greater than money understanding. As Ethan left, he turned back at the gate. "Mom, thank you for everything." I smiled, the wind carrying my words softly toward him. "No, son. Thank yourself for finally learning." The lilies swayed gently behind me as the sun dipped below the hill. My story wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about rediscovery proof that even the quietest hearts can rise again, and that respect, once earned through pain, can become the sweetest kind of freedom.